Is everyone feeling well rested? I know we're almost at the end of a long couple of days, so we're gonna try and keep this a little fun, a little exciting. My name is Vignesh Ram. You can call me Viggy. I lead public policy at Serve Robotics, and we're really excited to be here to talk a little bit about how last mile delivery can enliven urban life. And I'll also be joined by a Miami Beach commissioner who the two of us are going to have a short conversation where we can chat about the challenges that Miami Beach faces, ways in which she's been looking at discrete problems over there and leading in the region. So we've all heard the promise of the on-demand economy. You can get meals, coffee, groceries, and new household items all from your phone. I'm sure many of you have used Postmates, Uber Eats, DoorDash, ordered from Temu. But all too often, to get those products to your door, it looks like this. A warehouse on the outskirts of your town hosting semis and dispatching box trucks, adding to congestion, threatening public safety, and generally making living in cities just a little bit more annoying. The packages on our doorsteps may be convenient, but they've only increased congestion and carbon emissions and hurt our local businesses. Cities aren't built for cars. They're built for people. And food delivery is a huge part of this problem, with 6 billion trips each year. Since even before the pandemic, I loved my Uber Eats, I loved my Postmates, I loved my DoorDash, because I could support all those local mom and pop shops that we all love. But why do we transport 2-pound burritos in 2-ton vehicles that are moving less than 2 miles? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and our cities are basically littered with burrito taxis. And we use more energy moving the car than the burrito itself. We're releasing 22,000 tons of carbon emissions daily just to be able to move those goods throughout our cities. And the economics don't make sense either. Why does a fast fashion shipment from China cost me just $2 while a meal from Chinatown costs $8? Meet Serve. Now, what you'll notice there is you come to a lot of events like this, you see a lot of vaporware, you see a lot of great ideas. I think over the past several years, we've seen everything from flying cars to the proliferation of some new micromobility device. But what I want to point out is those are robots that are currently doing over 50,000 deliveries in not just Los Angeles, here in Miami, Miami Beach, Dallas, and we're going to be expanding to Atlanta this year as well. And as I mentioned, some of the challenges that we face are that in local commerce basically has a disadvantage when you compare it to long-distance freight. It costs $2 to get something from China, $8 to get something from Chinatown, and this is largely because of some of the advances that we've seen in long-distance freight that haven't translated to short-distance delivery and last mile. A cargo ship with a crew of 20 moves more goods than the entire British Navy did 100 years back, but the average mailman does the work of 2 people from 100 years ago. That's a 5,000 times productivity gain in long-distance shipping versus just 2 times in last mile. Now, cities aren't built for cars. They're built for people, and it's about time that we built delivery for people too. So Serve was built as a semi-autonomous delivery robot that's designed specifically for us to be able to take back our cities. We started in 2017 as the Special Projects Division of Postmates, and we were able to invest in a state-of-the-art Level 4 automation stack and drivetrain that's designed to deliver to your doorstep instead of sort of fancy ideas that aren't necessarily trying to solve real-world problems. And because 50% of all food delivery orders are under 2.5 miles, it was the perfect place to start. That's millions of monthly car trips in LA alone. And most delivery platforms are yet to turn profitable because we need our meals within 30 minutes or less, and we can't wait for them to show up in a big box truck the next day. So while everyone complains about the cost, restaurants say they're overcharged, customers think they pay too much, and oftentimes the drivers know they aren't being paid enough. There are alternatives that we can look at to be able to address these challenges. Now, Postmates was acquired by Uber in 2020, and Serve was spun out in 2021, which made our technology available to other partners outside of Uber. And this was all at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, where people were ordering on demand more than ever. According to Columbia Business School, customer spending on food delivery increased 70% in March of 2020 alone, and that has increased tenfold over the last couple of years. And while on-demand delivery skyrocketed, cities also changed. We've all seen our favorite restaurants open patios and alfresco dining, and many cities took the opportunity to pedestrianize our infrastructure, expanding bike lanes, offering new third spaces for us to be able to enjoy our communities. I think many of the folks who work for cities here are familiar with the Slow Streets programs that we've seen domestically and internationally, and that's just one example of the ways in which we can take back that public space. And this is an environment that Serve calls home. It's about time that we right-sized last-mile delivery. And we designed these robots with people in mind, from a shape that's reminiscent of a shopping cart to eyes that can signal intent, so we don't have to play chicken to see who passes by first. We're still developing some of this technology, but hopefully we'll be able to see it in the coming months and years. And ultimately, Serve is safer, cleaner, and better for our community. Safer because delivery robots move at walking speed with a minuscule fraction of the kinetic energy of cars doing these deliveries today. And we share data with cities that are able to help those cities design sidewalks and public infrastructure so that it's safer not just for the robots to operate, but for folks who may have ambulatory challenges, people who may be using motorized scooters, wheelchairs. There are innumerable folks who can benefit from the advances that cities can make with the data that we're able to share there. And we're also cleaner than EVs. Robots could reduce global emissions by 2% annually, and that's because of the sheer volume of food delivery orders and last mile delivery that takes place annually. Globally, this amounts to 1.2 million fewer cars on the road and 15,000 fewer tons of carbon daily. But this isn't the future. It's right now. We've been operating for 5 years in West Hollywood, which is where we started. We started our operations and made an impact. And even though the city had banned electric scooters, we were able to chart a cooperative path with the city to help them meet their mobility goals with clear benchmarks that enabled us to prove our use case, as well as helping the city meet their Vision Zero goals. And just over 2 years ago now, West Hollywood approved a program to allow up to 40 robots from each of its operators to operate within its 1.9 square miles. And since then, we've seen 25% month-over-month delivery growth since 2022, with a completion rate that's significantly higher than more traditional drivers. But West Hollywood and LA were just the beginning. We've expanded from there to markets across the US. I mentioned Dallas, I mentioned here in Miami Beach, and we'll get into sort of how our operations look like there as well. And then we're gonna be rolling out in Atlanta over the course of the next month. And we've signed a contract with Uber to deploy 2,000 robots across the US, and we'll be deploying we've deployed the first 250 over the course of Q1 this year. And the rest of them are gonna be coming over the course of this year with a larger volume at the end of the year. Now here in Miami and in Miami Beach, across the metro, we had 50 merchants that were signed up within the first month of us operating, which is quite significant, but within 9 days, we were able to increase the number of deliveries by 3.6x, which just shows that this is the start of something quite significant. We've had a handful of robots in the beginning, and we've already seen that scale quadruple, and it's going to continue from there. And the neighborhoods we've been operating in, if you're around Brickell, you can see us. If you're staying in Miami Beach, definitely keep an eye out, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But ultimately, as we seek to grow, the untapped market for robot and drone delivery globally can amount to over $450 billion annually. This is quite significant. And so as we see what's around the corner, it's not just robotic delivery, it's drones, it's creating hub and spoke models so that you're right-sizing delivery, not just for what's being delivered, but the types of public spaces that you're interacting with: sidewalks, bike lanes, roadways, pedestrianized paths. So it's a really exciting moment, and we'd love for you to join us in our journey. So definitely come by and say hello. And with that, I want to start our conversation. So I'd like to invite Commissioner Laura Dominguez up here. She's a city commissioner with Miami Beach and was elected in 2022. She grew up in the Miami Metro and is a graduate of Miami-Dade College as well as and is also an alum of the Miami Beach Leadership Academy. So, Commissioner? Thank you for joining.
Thank you very much. What a great presentation.
Thanks. Put this down. All right. So to kick things off, I have to ask, what's your favorite way to get around Miami Beach?
Well, Miami Beach is a very unique place. It's very walkable, particularly in the South Beach area. And I live on Belle Isle, which is on the Venetian, the easternmost island. So I tend to walk over to Sunset Harbor and Lincoln Road to run errands. We also have a really good trolley system, and I take the trolley, and of course I also take my car.
I love the trolley system. Every time I'm there, I'm like, ooh, it's great. So if any of you have not used it, I urge you to.
And it's free.
Ooh. How long has the trolley system been around?
It's been around for about 10 years, and we continuously look at ways to improve.
So I'm curious, over your time in Miami Beach, how have you seen the city change, evolve, adapt its approach to new mobility challenges?
The city has definitely gotten more tech throughout the years. One of the instigators was actually COVID. So the world was still kind of going on, but slowly, and people had to get their building permits and inspections. And so we immediately turned to make those things online, and we've kept it that way, and it's really helped to streamline the processes. We also adopt different smart city technologies. So one of the things is if somebody's looking for parking, we have sensors in the different garages and parking lots so people know where to find a car at the least amount. And a lot of our street lights are also operated with LED lighting, and it's smart lighting. So it helps with not having a person turn on the switch. It's done for public safety.
That's great. I know that's been a real challenge for a lot of cities to move away from push to cross. I am curious in terms of any hurdles that you've seen as those smart mobility initiatives have come online. Is there anything that you'd like to see from private sector partners that you're not seeing currently that could help improve that public infrastructure?
To be honest, Vig, we can clone you because you did it the right way. Sometimes people deploy initiatives and then we're running around trying to clean up, and you came to the city first. You said, this is my idea. I loved it, and I actually, as you know, sponsored it, and it's been through the legislative process under review. And so that's the way to do it. First, go meet with the city, meet with the residents, listen and hear to what their concerns are, do a small rollout first so that you can see what the initial challenges are, and then you can scale and deploy more as needed. But meeting with the city and the residents, that's the top thing.
It's really great that you mentioned that. One of the experiences that we've definitely noticed is we do have contact information on every one of the robots, and I know folks also reach out to the commissioner about our deployments, and being responsive has been honestly yielded, I think, dividends, not just in terms of our relationship locally with local businesses, with community members, members of the disabled and differently abled communities, but also being able to create a little bit more of a feedback loop, because oftentimes, as a tech company, it's very easy to be sort of a black box that's located in a different city with I'm sure many of you have the experience of trying to call customer support and ending up in an endless loop of messages, and having the ability to be able to address things quickly. It's still a muscle we're building, but I'm really glad that it's been able to leave that impression.
Yeah, it's been very positive, and Miami Beach, I'm sure with every city that you have the robots in, Miami Beach has a ton of different residence groups on social media, and there's been such a buzz. I see pictures almost daily. I saw Mackenzie.
The robots have names, by the way. You can also see Dakota outside, so I definitely urge you to go take a selfie if you get a chance. No, that's great. I mean, I am curious because I know there are other technologies that have deployed locally. I mean, over the years, I remember Aurora had an AV program that was in sort of the greater Miami metro. There are electric scooters that you'll see around. There's robots, and I'm curious about ways in which you've seen, like you don't have to throw anyone under the bus, but I am curious whether there's anything that you've seen that is that folks can learn from and hopefully adapt.
So similar to West Hollywood, Miami Beach had a no scooter rental policy, and the reason was when you would look around Brickell, it was like a graveyard of scooters. So while they were very handy to get people around from point A to point B, the docking and locations where they could be left was not thought through, and then ultimately led them to be thrown out, right?
Yeah, it's hard. I think like with fleet management, there's especially for scooters, because there's a little bit of sort of tragedy of the commons. Everyone's trying to go everywhere, and oftentimes the built environment is going to nudge people in a certain direction, but people's needs might nudge them in a different direction. So you'll see a scooter where you weren't expecting to see it, and even for us, we're as a delivery robot operator, we're chasing volume. So we're going to go to the areas where there's high numbers of exports and deliver to places with high numbers of imports. Younger communities, people who tend to shop a little bit more online, are of course going to be the folks that use it more often. And then the commercial corridors are where we're picking things up. And so one of the things that we've been trying to do, we were mentioning the data sharing, but helping cities understand where we have choke points as well. Where are we having issues where we're clustering robots, where robots are unable to leave a specific neighborhood efficiently. And this is still a work in progress. I know we have Andrew from OMF, the Open Mobility Foundation, here. I know they've been spending a lot of time thinking about this as well, so I definitely urge you to speak with him. I'm curious if you could snap your fingers and magically fix any transportation challenge in Miami Beach, what would it be?
So Miami Beach is a barrier island, and we're 7 miles long, and we're about 2 miles wide, depending on the area that you're at. There are 3 main points that you can come in, and that's MacArthur, Julia Tuttle, and the 79th Street Causeway, and then a smaller entry point on the Venetian. We have 22,000 hotel rooms, and on any given high-impact weekend, like Art Basel or Food and Wine Festival, we can have 500,000 people in our city, and they're all getting in through those 3 causeways. And it can be a nightmare. It's really, really tough. And so if I could snap my fingers and change something, it would be to have rapid transit over one of those causeways, or all of them for that matter. I know that I've worked with the county commissioners on getting that done. The initial idea was to do it on 5th Street MacArthur, but a lot of political reasons led that to stop, and that was fine. I was more in favor of doing it over the Julia Tuttle, which is 41st Street. Our largest employer is Mount Sinai, and followed by the Fontainebleau Hotel. And on our roadways, a lot of times during rush hour, it's the hospital and hotel industry workers that are getting on and off. So if we can find a way for them to take public transit instead, that would really help alleviate the traffic. So,
Yeah, it's interesting to hear that because there's a oftentimes, we're talking about goods movement in the Serve context, and I think, for you being in city government, you're thinking holistically, not just about goods movement, but about how we move people, and even getting things to Miami Beach, like how do we do so effectively? One of the selling points we'll often make is that if you're able to order not just food, but any sort of household items or do any e-commerce locally, we should try and nudge people toward that. And being able to do so in a way that doesn't increase congestion could yield innumerable benefits. Ultimately, when people order from sort of larger e-commerce retailers, I would imagine that those box trucks or those cargo vans are going over one of those 3.5 entry points, and that just ends up leading to opportunities for conflict. I'm curious about a different kind of conflict, which is the beach has both a large number of residents as well as a large number of tourists at any given time, and I'd imagine they have sort of differing needs. And what infrastructure improvements do you think could be made, or are there any good ideas that you've seen that would help to harmonize some of those conflicts that come up?
I think improvement in our bus systems. The bus system, we have the trolley, which is local, but the other bus systems are with the county, and that would include bringing visitors over from Miami International Airport seamlessly to our city. We also have a convention center that we spent $1 billion to renovate. And so throughout the year, we have different conventions that come. Some conventions attract what the city calls day trippers, so it's people that are coming from the mainland. We'd really prefer for them to get on public transportation and make their way across, because that would really help alleviate the congestion, because that's really our number one problem. Of course, we have resiliency items that we're tackling. That's a completely different conversation, because we do invest in infrastructure for resiliency measures. But when it comes to mobility, getting people off the roads is our biggest challenge. Miami was built, Greater Miami was built after cars were invented, so it wasn't built compact and dense like you would see in New York and other cities that were built before cars. It was built with the expectation that you're going to drive across town, and it's changing the mentality of the car culture that has been a big struggle.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we've noticed is the width of sidewalks is something that, when we look at different areas in which we operate, we always have to map the sidewalk before we get going. And a lot of this information is not publicly available, or the city itself might not be collecting it on a regular basis. So you don't often know where those choke points are until we start deploying, and then we'll realize that some areas will have narrow sidewalks, and it differs by city, right? Like this is not standardized. Every city has different needs, and I would imagine some of this is because there are a lot of people in cars, and anytime you're thinking about expanding a sidewalk, you might lose a lane of traffic, right? Or parking, exactly. So when we're having conversations with local residents, this doesn't just apply to us, but for anybody else that's like thinking about non-vehicular, non-automotive ways of moving around cities, how do you suggest we engage with those communities? Because I know they're legitimate concerns. Someone who is driving to get to work, we don't want them to end up being late because there wasn't enough space for them to get around. But at the same time, right now, they're we mentioned the burrito taxis. There's a lot of burrito taxis on the road. So how do you suggest that we do that outreach?
Neighborhood associations. One thing that just came to mind, one of your colleagues was telling me that the Miami person for Serve is here, and I'm going to run out and invite him to come with me on Thursday to the Sobe West Neighborhood Association. They cover West Avenue, which is one of our largest and densest neighbors, residential neighborhoods, and they usually get between 75 to 100 people that attend, which is pretty good for a neighborhood association meeting. But the leadership needs to hear, and they will convey the message to the group on what you guys are doing, and then they'll also collect feedback and tell you. And this was mentioned earlier, but being responsive is key when you're deploying something new, and you guys have been amazing. I really appreciate how well you've taken feedback.
Thank you. That's really nice to hear. I think one thing that's been very sort of top of mind for us is so I spent the last couple of days, we were doing a team offsite the last couple of days, and different folks across the company were asking questions about, why do the robots have this wheelbase? Why do they weigh X amount? How do we move them around? And all of the heuristics that we use for determining the size of a safe robot are based upon the ways in which people move around and what you would expect on a sidewalk. So that includes the robot's width being equivalent to that of an average wheelchair, the weight being about the weight of an average person that you would bump into on the sidewalk. Even the speeds that the robot travels at are what you would expect. And that's mainly because we want to make sure that folks are not caught off guard if they back into one, or that based on its size, that we can also make sure that the infrastructure is built for it. And this is, I think, one of those areas that is still admittedly new for us, right? Like we're still kind of working on this, is engaging with the accessibility community and making sure that we're able to echo concerns that they may raise in terms of how our built environment favors certain types of people, or privileges folks who are largely able to walk and are ambulatory, or are able to navigate around bushes or areas where there might not be, where there tree impingements or other issues like that. How does, especially since Miami Beach has sort of like a really sort of long and storied history, there are a lot of residents that have been there a long time, especially for aging folks and folks who are part of the disabled or differently abled communities. What are some of the things that you hear from them in terms of the way that the city could be improved?
So we have a very engaged population. Our residents really know what's going on. They watch commission meetings, they watch committee meetings. Part of that engagement comes from our city being so open and accessible to them. Our meetings are not only recorded, but they're uploaded, so anybody can go to the city website and look at a meeting or committee, commission committee meeting at any time. We have about 44 resident groups. One of them is Senior Affairs, and the other one, another one that I can mention, is our Disability Committee. And it includes people that are blind, in wheelchairs, all different types of mobility issues. And so they've given us feedback even to have special Mobi mats in certain areas of Miami Beach so that people with wheelchairs can have access to the beach. We have an adaptive day once a month during the summer. It just kicked off last week, I think it was, where special wheelchairs and people with mobility issues, with the help of professionals, get into the water and have that experience. So that's the type of feedback that we've been receiving.
Yeah, that's it's really good to hear a lot of that, because I've seen this echoed in other cities here and there in terms of the feedback that you'll hear from committees and commissions, advisory boards, residents that basically get together and want to express concerns that they might be hearing from a specific angle. I'm curious whether there's any other cities or countries that you think are doing a good job. Has there been a place that you visited that you think, oh, that's interesting, maybe I could bring it back to Miami Beach?
So in January, I visited Helsinki, and I thought that their mobility accessibility was really top notch. They want to make it accessible for on apps and have a variety of things. So I really liked that. So whether it was January, so I was not going to be biking in Helsinki in January. But the app did have ways to move around, including bike and transit or delivery service, all accessible in one area. So I thought that that was pretty amazing. I know that Paris has done a lot of forward-thinking ideas in taking away car culture and doing more with bikes and things. So they're not quite there yet. I was there in October, and the traffic couldn't have been worse, but they're working on it. And so I do appreciate that. Another place I visited that I really was impressed with their smart city framework was Singapore, and taking their transit system as well. So we definitely have a lot to learn, and things that I can take back. All I can do right now is advocate for proper transit in our east-west corridors.
So this actually gets to my next question, which is fast forward 10 years, 15 years. Someone's visiting Miami Beach. What do you hope they experience when they come to your city?
A seamless experience that from airport to Causeway to their hotel or their friend's house or the convention center was one seamless rapid transit experience.
So I know we're coming up to time, so I want to ask one last question. I don't want to get too ahead of anyone's skis, but let's play future mayor. If you could greenlight any crazy, absolutely out of this world transportation project, what would it be?
So I've had meetings with two companies that are in the urban air mobility infrastructure. I love it. And so if I could pick one thing, it would be to have our city, okay, if we have our infrastructure on the roads for bike, car, scooter, pedestrian, but that we also have urban air mobility infrastructure for people to be able to get from point A to point B in that manner. I can't wait for that technology to be readily available.
It's funny you say that because we've done a little bit of work in terms of like hub and spoke models between robots and drones, mainly because if drones are going to be picking up food delivery orders, you don't want them to be huddling around a restaurant. You don't want to go to your favorite restaurant and see 7 drones waiting outside for orders, but the robots can sort of line up politely in front of it. So we can do the pickup, hand it off to a drone. The drone then does the rest of the delivery, and it's a way for us to make sure that, again, we're talking about right sizing, right? Like when you're, earlier I was mentioning, it costs $2 to get something from China, $8 to get something from Chinatown. What's really happening there is when you're getting something through sort of long distance freight, it's on a freighter, it's on a ship. It goes to a truck. It then goes to a smaller vehicle that's coming into your neighborhood, and so last mile delivery could look like that as well. And yeah, it would be really exciting. Hope we can take part in this and help make Miami Beach the city of the future.
Would love that.
Awesome, thank you. And thank you all for tuning in. I know it's the end of the day. Feel free to come say hi.